Hi, my name is Christian Reed and I'm the founder of REEKON Tools. When we announced the M1 caliper in late April, we were very excited to see the positive comments and feedback we were getting in regards to the device, and we're very interested in some of the applications that people described potentially wanting to use a device for. After some consideration, we thought the best way to answer those questions would be to have a demonstration video where we highlight many of these applications. So let's get some wood and get started cutting. All right, so before we get started, I wanted to give an overview of my equipment and layout setup here, just so everyone is aware of how I'm cutting the wood. So to start off with, I have my dual bevel Bosch sliding miter saw, which is pretty neat as it has this cool SARS linkage in the back of it, as opposed to rails found on most sliding miter saws, which allows you to mount it flush up against the wall, which is really useful when it's in the basement making cuts. It's sitting on a Husky portable workbench, pretty straightforward about that, just fits the form factor pretty nicely. In addition to the supports that kick out of the saw itself, I also have these rollers over here which support the wood pretty well and will make the sliding process cutting very easy when moving forward. Over here I have a pretty wide assortment of wood, ranging from finishing lumber to dimensional Douglas fir 2x4s, 2x6s, to get the full spectrum of cutting. And then finally, to keep things clean as we're cutting, I have the Festool CT26 dust extractor connected to the miter saw, which will hopefully prevent us from making a big mess in the garage today. So I think that pretty much covers it. Okay, so now that we have an overview of where everything is and what equipment we're using, let's go ahead and get the M1 mounted to the saw fend. So I'm going to take it out of its hard case here. Take it out. You can see it's pretty small. You know, here's my fist next to it, so it's a pretty compact device. The clamp is integrated, which is pretty nice, and it has the arm on it, which will self-adjust to the type of wood as well as the height of wood that we're using on it. So when selecting a position on the fence, I'm just gonna find a nice comfortable position, make sure it's not hitting any of the ribs on the back of the fence, find a comfortable position, squeeze down, set the arm down, and it should be all set up. So you can see it's a pretty nice clamp. You can see the whole saw and table vibrating, which is showing a nice connection between it. So the fence is set. We have it clamped on. Gonna turn on the device. Defaulting to centimeters, so let's toggle over to inches, and we're ready to get started. So now we have our M1 caliper mounted to the saw fence. Let's get started on a few more features and then begin cutting. So I'm going to go ahead and grab a 2x4 from over here. One of the first things you can see is how the arm adjusts to the height of the wood. So I'm simply going to slide it under here, and you can see how the arm has adjusted to the height of the wood on here. Another pretty cool feature about it is you can select whatever units you want for it. So right now I have it in inches decimal mode, but a couple of the other ones are feet inches decimal mode, inches fractional mode, feet inches fractional mode, and centimeters. So really just whatever your preference is, whatever you're used to, you can set it to that and make measuring much easier. So we're just about getting ready to start it here, but the last thing we need to do rather is the blade offset. So the blade on here is going to take some amount of material off of the wood that we're cutting, and our final product is going to wind up on the right side of the saw blade. So to enter that mode, I'm going to hold down the blade offset here and tell the M1 caliper how thick the blade is. So this goes up in 64ths of an inch, and I know my blade is 3/32 of an inch thick. So once I hit it on the screen, I hit confirm, go back to the units that I want to be in, re-zero it, and now I have the blade compensation. You can see the blade icon there, the negative icon showing that it's active and ready to make accurate cuts on the other side of it. So I think that's a pretty good overview of the device, so let's get started cutting. All right, so for our first cut here, let's go ahead and make 5 pieces here. So going to take the 2x4, make an initial cut here to establish a zero position, and then we'll be on our way. All right, good, 2 more. All right, seems pretty good. Let's see how we did. Okay, so let's check how they came out. But first, let's start off with make sure they all are actually 5 inches, and that seems pretty spot on to me. So see if the camera can focus on it, but that seems like a pretty good measurement to me. So that seems to be good. And now let's take a look at them all side by side here. So here's all the pieces side by side, and that seems pretty spot on to me. Again, I think you'd have trouble hitting those with just a pencil and a marker. Maybe a hard stop will get you a little bit better, but you know, you can see a very, very slight variance there, but that seems pretty good to me. All right, so we just saw how well making 5 5-inch cuts came out. So now let's try making 3 16-inch cuts and make sure the repeatability and accuracy holds up over a slightly longer distance. So starting out with a new 2x4 here, gonna make my zeroing cut. And start making 16-inch pieces, a little too far. Okay, good one. And number 2. That's nice. And number 3. Oops, 1 inch too far. All right, that all seems good. So let's take a look and see how they came out. Okay, so let's check out how accurate that cut was. So taking out the tape measure, putting it on, and yeah, that's spot on. So you can see that's a nice 16 inches there. So now let's check the repeatability of it. So holding these all in the upright position, you can see there's a little bit of variance on it. Okay, so checking the precision of these now seems to be pretty good. The first one seems to be a little bit, maybe a 32nd of an inch smaller than the other two, which seem pretty spot on with one another. Yeah, I can't even feel the gap on that one, so perhaps there was something a little bit screwed up about that one, but overall pretty good looking cuts. Okay, so for this one, I want to see if speed makes a difference or changes the accuracy of the measurement. So I'm going to make one marking at 76 inches, moving the wood slowly, and then see if the saw blade lines up, moving quickly to the same location. So let's start out here. Won't make the cut, just touch off on the left side of the blade. Hit the 0 button. Now I'm going to go all the way out to 76 inches, moving pretty quickly, not really trying to go deliberately or slow. At 76, I'm going to make a little bit of a pen mark here to indicate where it is. So try to make that a little bit darker so we know where we're going back. Sink the blade in a little bit. So now I'm going to try the same thing again, moving slowly, and see if there's any difference in where the measurement mark lines up. Okay, touching off on the left side of the blade, zeroing, and now very deliberately and slowly I'm going to move the wood to the location. Very gently, not going to jerk it, not going to yank it, just very slowly going to the location. Okay, getting close now, 1 more inch. .76, bring it down, and it's spot on, yeah. So seemingly speed doesn't make any difference in the measurement, and it will still output the same regardless of if you're yanking it or moving it gently and slowly. Okay, so now let's do a comparison to using a tape measure to measure 4 10-inch cuts or using the M1 caliper to measure 4 10-inch cuts. So let's start off by using the M1 caliper to do them, and then we'll follow up with the tape measure and see the time difference between them. All right, so we have our M1 cuts over here now, and now let's do it the old-fashioned way. So I'm gonna take this off, and then we can start the timer for the tape measure. All right, here we go. So each time you have to remeasure, let's compensate for the plate thickness and doing all this, which is, let's see what practical, so I'm sure some people would be. All right, last one. Okay, so both of them seem pretty spot on at 10 inches here. I think there's actually a little bit more consistency using the M1 because I think I was rushing a bit with the line measurement marks, but you can see from the timer that it is still quite a bit faster for making multiple cuts using the M1 than it is to have to stop each time, break your workflow, and do a measurement with a tape measure on it. So certainly can see one advantage for making repeat cuts using the M1 versus a traditional tape measure. So let's continue making some cuts. Okay, so I only so far have used dimensional 2x4 lumber, but just to show you the versatility of the device, I have in my hands now, what is this? 1.25 inch PVC pipe, and you can see how easily it fits under and will measure largely in the same way that wood does. So just to demonstrate here, let me make a couple of 6-inch pieces and see how those come out. Workflow is not different than just make sure it's maintaining contact with them. Largely the same as cutting into it before. Okay, fine. So again, those cuts seem, again, pretty flat, maybe like a 64th of an inch off on one of them, but those are all pretty spot on, definitely for any pipe work you're doing. And yeah, that's a spot on match for 6 inches. So might be a little bit hard to see with the camera, but you know, take my word for it, it's 6 inches on the money. All right, so we tested out with pipe now, so now why don't we try some finishing lumber for our next cut that we make here. So we've made a few cuts to compare the precision of it, but let's check the accuracy now and go off a cut list. So I have a piece, looks like a 1x3 piece of pine, and let's do a series of cuts and then compare them to a tape measure. So we'll do a 3-inch cut, call it a 7-inch piece, 14-inch one, and then we'll do a 26-inch piece and check the lower end of the spectrum for measurements and see how they compare to a tape measure in terms of accuracy. Okay, first one, 3 inches. Okay, now we'll do a 7-inch piece. 14.5, use a non-whole number for this one, change this up a little bit. Okay, now we'll wrap up with 26 3/4 inch for this last piece. Okay, here we go. So 26, 27.5, and here we go. All right, so bear with me here as we try to get the wood up by the camera. So this is our 3-inch piece. How does this look for focus? All right. So that seems to me to be pretty spot on. How does that look? Good? All right, so here's the 7-inch piece. I'm gonna take a look first so I can see it. That looks pretty good. There's our 7-inch piece. Now here's our 14.5-inch piece. Yeah, that's money. That's money. How's that look? We see that in the camera? Zoom out a little bit. All right. 14.5 inches, nice. And then our last one was 26 3/4 of an inch. I made a game time decision there, and that one's call it a 32nd of an inch off, but still probably good for most type of cuts. But yeah, definitely about I call it a 32nd of an inch off on that one. So. Okay, so camera battery died for that one, but I was explaining that this one appears to be about a 32nd of an inch off, slightly bigger? Yeah, slightly 32nd of an inch bigger than 26 3/4 of an inch. So assuming that's due to my own measurement error, but you can take a look at it there and see it's pretty darn close. Okay, so let's do the 48 3/8 inch piece, which will be 48.38 inches on my screen. But again, if I wanted to switch over to fractional mode, I could certainly do that as well. But We'll make it a little bit more difficult for everyone. Okay, so this should be 48 3/8 inches. And we are spot on. So good cut that time. Try to hold it up for the camera here, but you can see that's pretty close. How are we looking on focus? Bring it down a little bit. Yeah, so you can see that's pretty spot on for 48 again, and 3/8 of an inch. Might have to take out your calculators to measure it a little bit, but okay. Now let's do the 72-inch cut. Okay, so the 48 3/8 inch cut came out pretty nice, so now let's try a 72 5/8 inch cut and see how that comes out. All right, let me get a measurement here and then hold it up for the camera to see. This is 72 5/8. Yep, and that is spot on. So now let's see how I can hold this up to the camera here. Okay, is this in focus? A little bit closer. Nice. So that is pretty spot on. Nice. Cuts, but why don't we make a few angled cuts and see how that process works. So I have again a 1 by 3 inch piece of pine here, so let's start off by putting in a 45-degree cut on it. So slide this over to make our initial cut. Okay, so now we have a few options for what we want to do next on it. So say I'm mounting this butt up against something and I want to make a normal 0-degree cut to it. So I'm going to go back to 0, and again, really no different than measuring a normal piece of wood. If I'm measuring the inside of it, I will touch off on the edge right there. I'll hit my 0 button and go down. If I want to do an inside cut, I'm doing the same exact thing on that side, assuming this is flat. So for this purpose, let's assume we want to measure from the outside because that's a little bit easier. And we want to make this cut, say, 10 inches long. So just go out to 10 inches and it's really that straightforward. Nothing much to it. And that's 10 inches, so pretty straightforward. So again, we just touched off on this outside edge, made exactly 10 inches from here to here, but if we had a measurement from there to there, we would just touch off on this inner edge there. No big deal. Okay, so now let's put two 31.5-degree angles, but do it with wood flat this time, just to demonstrate that. Coming down. Okay, again, we don't have the blade offset on it because there's no way to compensate for it since we're cutting at an angle. So again, assuming we want 10 inches from the measured from the outside edge. So just getting it pretty close in front there, hitting the 0 button. And then we will go to 10 inches, which should give us an edge-to-edge measurement of 10 inches exactly. Flat side angle on each side. I'm just going to check the measurement on it, but yep, 10 inches, so pretty straightforward. So then you can see the collection of angles here, all of which can be cut in their respective ways. You just have to be a little bit tactical about where you're zeroing and what the blade offset is, but no reason why you can't make a wide assortment of angled cuts to suit whatever your needs are and however you want to get the cuts done. So So another thing I've been doing a lot of is measuring the wood flat like this, but there's no reason why you couldn't pull it up if you want to make a particular cut in it. So a little bit harder for the wheel to self-actuate, but you just lift it up and straightforward from there. So let's do the same thing now. 45-degree angle. Let's make a 35-degree angle. Change it up a little bit. 31.5 seems to have a detent in it, so let's give that a try. So I'm going to go over here. Now let's go back to 0. Same thing, touch off on the outside edge. Hit the 0 button. Do the same thing for 10 inches and then make a cut. We got 10 inches. Perfect. So you can now see a series of cuts we made where we have a flat edge on one side and an angled cut on one side. Okay, so now let's make angled cuts on both sides. So let's start off with a 45-degree cut and do another 45-degree cut on the other side as well. So we'll see. This is where it gets a little bit tricky. So unfortunately we're not able to use the blade offset anymore because of the width of the blade effectively acting on the wood is different. For those math wizards out there, it's actually the blade width divided by the cosine of the angle we're at, but we won't get into the math details now. So for the time being, we'll have to disable the blade offset and just zero off from the right side of the blade to avoid needing it. Is probably the most straightforward way to do it, unless you feel like doing some math, in which case you're able to put a new offset in it. So I'm going to zero it. I'm going to hit 0 exactly. And then let's say I'm doing an outside measurement cut. So I'm going to line up the right side of the blade with the front edge of the wood, hit the 0 button, and then I'm going to bring it out to 10 inches. Oops, a little bit too far. 10 inches, and here we go. See, we got a nice double angle cut. Let's check the measurement on it. And we're pretty close, about a 30-second long. Okay, so a lot of the demonstrations I did here were to suit a specific purpose, and it's not how I would use this personally if I were on a job site. So for this last scene here, I'm going to run through it as though I had a cut list. I had to make a series of cuts on this 2x4 and run through it at production speed so everyone can get a sense of how that is. So here we go, and let's get started. Okay, so you can see the pile of cuts here that I just whipped out. Again, I'm not going to measure them all directly using a tape measure for comparison right now, but feel free to do that in your own time, and you can see the potential time savings from doing it this way, as well as the consistency between cuts, just to show you that I wasn't just cutting and praying to get the measurement, that they are actually where they're supposed to be, and very consistent to one another as well. So pretty cool to see it used in real world, and hopefully I'm able to get a project in using the device sometime in the near future. So we hope everyone has enjoyed watching this video, and hopefully we were able to answer some of the more common questions that come up when seeing the M1 used for the first time. We'll be very open to doing more of these videos, so if you need to see something, curious about a particular application, leave a line in the comments and we'll be happy to address it in a future video. Thanks.